When I made this channel, I made it with the purest of intentions to be able to help people to prepare for the inevitable. Now, I'm making this video, and I'm going to try and make it relatively short and to the point, and to help people understand not only why I do what I do, but also this has to do with my upcoming project where I'm going to actually finish with my Texas map. And some of these are new, like this is a sneak peek at the tanks rolling up on the airport, essentially taking it without much of a resistance. And of course you have a little bit of tactical movement here in downtown Houston. You know, you have Chi-Coms rolling up under the highway and coming in and, you know, taking the courthouse and about to, you know, move in on the resistors that are remaining. You know, some of these are older, but I put them here to illustrate a point, and the point is that the way fourth generation warfare works, and I really hope people understand this, is that when you have an invasion, you know, you have Trojan horse shock armies, which are already inside this country. Like you see the circled units, those are the Trojans. You know, down here, you know, here's the 1st and 6th PLAN Marine brigades, and you know they're doing a beach landing, and you know you would have Chi-Com and Russian ships off the coast supporting them, because of course, you know, they would do this under the guise of a large naval drill as the aircraft prepare to fly over from Mexico, from Cuba, from Canada to go on their runs and quickly achieve air superiority. Because remember, you know, China and Russia have some incredible air-to-air missiles and also air-to-ground munitions. And of course, you know, you would have many thousands of Club K container missiles inside of this country that would wreak havoc on any targets that they were set on, as all these could rise up, and each container would carry 4 caliber cruise missiles or their Chinese made equivalents, and fire them over 100 miles in many cases to hit targets, well in excess of 100 miles. I did a whole video on the Club K and the technical specifications a very long time ago. It's not fresh in my mind right now, but I'm just using that as an example, as well as the airstrikes, because China and Russia have enormous strategic bomber fleets, and they would most definitely be using those to strike many key strategic targets across the country. You know, they would be coming in, they would be leveling cities, or they would be hitting key installations that they were planning on taking, you know, to support ground operations. And of course, you'd have swarms of fighter squadrons, each of these representing a fighter squadron or a ground attack squadron, because ground attack aircraft are similar size to fighters. You know, that would be there to provide close-in ground support, you know, air support for the ground troops, and, you know, close-in air support, and of course, you know, to strike specific targets as well. And the fighter jets would be there to protect the strategic aircraft and of course the ground aircraft as well, and maintain air superiority as quickly and efficiently as possible. You know, we certainly are not invincible. You know, our installations are not these monolithic fort-like structures, as I've explained before. You know, you have these installations with simple fences, and the CCP has purchased all kinds of properties all throughout the country, not just ports, but also farmland, houses, apartments, old abandoned factories, everything you can think of. And it's not hard to hide armored vehicles and weapons in this country, because as soon as the CCP truck drivers or pro-CCP trucking elements pick up these armored vehicles delivered to the Chi-Com ports, they can tarp them or disguise them and bring them in. They've had 20 years, actually more than 20 years now, to be doing this, to bring in all the armor to pre-position for their units. On the farmland, they could have many of those white greenhouses that can extend for many hundreds of meters as long as you want them, and you can put rows of them and put these vehicles inside of those and cover them with green tarp to make it appear as vegetation from the air, or you could put them in barns, pole barns, underground areas if they dug something like that and created their own type of underground garage type structures, or you can put them in abandoned factories. I mean, there's all kinds of places where you can hide these types of things, and Americans just don't get it. Most of them just don't get it. You know, you would have fifth column elements like the Chinese MSS and Russian FSB, Iranian Ministry of Intel, Pakistani ISI, all of them, you know, bad actors everywhere to conduct not just intelligence gathering, but also like sabotage type operations. Our electric grid is extremely vulnerable. Everything in this country is very vulnerable. And you would have the Trojan shock armies themselves as actual military and paramilitary units like the People's Armed Police and others. You know, this is my Texas map that I'm going to be presenting. And all these group armies and these several Russian combined arms armies, including the Trojan one, are all going to come in and split up. One going straight up the middle, one going here and fanning out to help the Trojans, who are already inside doing the heavy lifting, capturing cities and installations, like the big Fort Hood battle against all of 3 Corps that was here. You know, with a lot of our military spread around the world, you know, with all these regional wars popping up, that is to draw them in, split them up, make it easy to squash one by one by one by one like ants. You know, and then when everything on the home front is taken, you know, you are going to have, you know, these reservists and National Guard not being able to be called up in time, because when they do their surprise assault, you know, they're going to take out the satellites with their incredible anti-satellite weapons, you know, like the Dongnang 3 and the Dongnang 2s and the, you know, S500s and the FK2000s. All of those type of systems are going to be used to knock all our satellites out of the sky. You know, the war planners for Russia and China have bulked up on those. They know how many they need as per how many satellites we have. You know, so it's not like a hard thing to do. Their production rates are incredible. As I've mentioned before, I've showed the industrial production rates of Russia versus us and China versus us. And Russia outproduces us by overall arms production by a factor of 2 to 1. Their factories are running full speed ahead right now. And China, a factor of 6 to 1. And this is without mobilizing all their automotive industries, their domestic aircraft industries, and, you know, other industries for war production, you know, heavy trucks and all those industries for war production. That's without doing that. And China has the civil military fusion policy, which, as I've explained many times before, turns all their strategically purchased properties into bases for their units, including their allied units, because of course they're going to let Russians stock up and build up on their bases. You know, they have trucked in logistics and their vehicles and everything they need for the past 20 years out of these CHICOM CCP regime-owned ports. You know, it's not just China, it's their allies coming in as well. They've been seen in Canada and Mexico. It's obvious, you know. I mean, I only showed a video of all the roads that the Chinese paramilitary National Construction Corps produced in Mexico to get to their jumping off points in the country. I mean, the guy did a guided tour on the road and explained it and talked about how he saw Chinese tanks in southern Mexico, and he saw a Russian, Chinese, Pakistani, Iranian base, joint base on an island in Arizona Bay there, the Gulf, whatever that is. It's between the Baja Peninsula and mainland Mexico. I've said it before in an old video. I just skipped my mind right now, but, you know, pardon me, I have a brain injury. But anyways, they are building up in both Canada and Mexico. In Canada, they've been seen doing PT road marches in uniform on Salt Spring Island. Their Chinese aircraft have been seen flying over London, Ontario, fighter jets and such. Canada is an enormous country. I mean, it's even bigger than America, and there's all kinds of wilderness areas for the Chinese and their allies to build up in. China practically almost owns Canada at this point. You know, China says jump and Canada says how high. It's that type of relationship. I mean, even though nominally Canada's supposed to be our ally, their regime there is obviously under some kind of CHICOM control, because either the leadership is being blackmailed, because the MSS is known for their honey traps. They're an incredible intelligence agency, probably the best in the world. You know, that's contested which intelligence agency is the best, but the Chinese have incredible arms. I'll just put it that way. They have a intelligence gathering arm that involves, you know, the internet and hacking, and they have human intelligence, which involves people on the ground. They've committed all kinds of industrial and economic and military espionage and stolen much intellectual property from all kinds of countries, and they've used it to propel themselves ahead of everybody else in technology. It saved them a lot of money on research or R&D, you know. So it basically got them in a position where it saved them all kinds of money and allowed them to jump ahead of us, of the West. They have the crown jewels of the West, as I've explained before many times. So anyway, back to the map. When they would come across the border, the Trojans would already be busy capturing all their objectives inside the country, whether it be installations, infrastructure, you know, inside of cities. You know, they would be doing all their strikes. They would be going for the National Guard armories and local installations, airports, you name it, they would be going for it. This is the Houston map right here. And these are the Chinese combat arms brigades going for their basic, you know, all their targets. There's People's Armed Police here too, backing them up, and they're a fanatical CCP paramilitary element similar to the Waffen-SS. They do have artillery, they do have armored vehicles, and they also are very combat experienced from their fighting out in Xinjiang against we to the Gurs. And even Chinese special forces have been sent to the Syrian civil war on several deployments. You know, there's many articles about it. It's a known thing. They were called the Night Tigers. They're one of China's most elite elements. And they specifically went to Syria to battle we to the Gurs that joined the resistance against Assad's regime. So they really went there and backed Assad to the hilt like the Russians did. You know, even North Korea allegedly sent a contingent. They sent some kind of volunteer militia there, you know, to back Assad. So, you know, Iran, Russia, they're the most commonly known, but China is not as commonly known, although they gave Assad a lot of logistics and special forces support. So they did give military aid to Assad, including actual fighting forces and on several deployments. And they are in the area deployed in Iran as well. There's 50,000 Chi-Coms in Iran to back Iran if we are foolish enough to try to attack them, as I've talked about in my live stream. You know, Iran is not a pushover. It's not the same Iran back in the 80s. This is a new Iran, a better armed, a better equipped Iran, better trained Iran with better facilities inside their country for missiles and basically command and control. And they would be very difficult as an opponent, even by themselves. But with China and Russia backing them with their ISR capabilities, their intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, which is their radars, their satellites, their drones, everything that feeds real-time battlefield intel, they could basically just give that to the Iranians and back them with all of that to make sure that Iran can track all their targets and hit them with incredible accuracy, including stealth aircraft. You know, China has incredible anti-stealth radars, as I've mentioned. China's basically at the cutting edge of military technology, and the West is so arrogant and foolish and stupid they don't even want to admit to it. And Russia is too. You know, both nations are on like their, you know, fourth or fifth model of like hypersonic missile by now. We don't even have one yet that works. All our tests are failures, so they don't ever comment on it because it's always a failure. You know, we don't even have one. And besides, our industry is in such disarray that we need engineers, we need, you know, professional mathematicians, we need physicists, we need nuclear physicists, we need engineers, we need, you know, arms manufacturing professionals, skilled labor of all types, and we just don't have that. We just don't turn those types of people out anymore. If you recall, recently they were trying to pull people out of retirement to attempt to restart production lines for some higher-end weapons, you know, because we have really badly depleted ourselves with certain anti-tank weapon systems, with Stinger systems for close air support, or air defense, I'm sorry, for like point air defense. It's a man-portable air defense system. We've horribly depleted ourselves in those anti-tank systems. Yeah, we've depleted ourselves extremely bad in artillery shells. We've already given Ukraine already like 2/3 of all our artillery shells, and now they want to resupply Israel with more that were earmarked to go to Ukraine, because we even raided their shell depot. There was a joint U.S. Israeli shell depot, and we raided it basically, and, you know, gave those shells to Ukraine, and now, you know, we have to resupply it. So we're really going to be low on arms and munitions here at home, and we at our current production rates, at our current industry, our level of industry and skilled labor, it takes a very long time to replace things like all the 270 millimeter rocket artillery we pissed away. Over half of it we've sent to Ukraine. Over half. We had around 25,000 270 millimeter rockets, just the regular rockets, and we gave Ukraine over 12,000 already. So we're depleted down to like a little over half of our rocket stash. Now we're giving them ATACMS, which are these land-based cruise missile pods that you can put on the HIMARS or the M270 MLRS, and they will fire the 2 cruise missiles from the MLRS or 1 from the HIMARS. So because the HIMARS is like half the capacity of the tracked MLRS system, the M270. So basically, it takes about a year to produce. What is it again? It's like four M270 MLRS rockets a year. So that's just insane. It's crazy. So it would take decades at that production rate to really restock our supplies. It's in such disarray. And the same goes for the Patriot missiles we pissed away and everything else. So it's ridiculous. But anyways, it basically, you're looking at a situation where we have this depleted, hollowed out, woke military, and when we get invaded, yes, you're going to have armed civilians. That's what all these circles are. These are bands of armed civilians, and this is mixed military, the triangles. Just like on my other maps, this is artillery, where artillery is being fired at specifically, the dash lines. I have to sort of break it up like that because, for room, because I have to have maneuvers going on as well, and you have to be able to see things. So I have to break it up in certain ways, but that means it's hitting specific targets. Like this cluster of civilians in this part of the city is being hit. You have just this part of the city being shelled more toward downtown, and this area out here. And you have some military units that were mobilized, like the 72nd Brigade Combat Team, Infantry Brigade Combat Team, I'm sorry. And you basically have second ID, or I'm sorry, let me see, 36th ID, I apologize. You have these forces right here, and they're getting hammered because you have Chi-Com ground attack planes, fighter jets, and Russian heavy strategic aircraft coming in, and you really don't have any response to it. Here's some more strategic aircraft and fighters, Su-27s, and let me see what kind of aircraft these are. Tu-22Ms, heavy strategic bombers, and you have them basically coming in and just carpet munitioning all kinds of areas in support of the ground forces as well as artillery. You have all this concentrated firepower, and you get a situation where without the satellites, without the not just the satellites, but without the satellites, without the internet, without the military networks, without the telecom, without the grid, all the power's off. Nobody knows what's going on, where enemies are coming from. They're coming in from all kinds of directions, wherever there are CCP properties. Just a little further down the coast, you've got the beach landings going on here from the 1st and 6th PLAN Marine brigades. You got them doing landings here in support of the ground forces, the PAP paramilitary, and the the 83rd Group Army of the PLA, who are in the city, capturing this huge city. This is the 4th biggest city in America in terms of population, and you have a large force basically coming in to subdue it in terms of air power, in terms of land power, in terms of sea power, because of course you would have the ships firing sea-based cruise missiles to hit specific targets. You would have already had Club Ks hitting specific things as well, pinpoint accuracy with their Club K cruise missiles. Caliber cruise missiles are supersonic. They break the sound barrier, unlike the Tomahawk, which is subsonic and can actually be shot down even with AAA, like flak cannons, ground-based air defense artillery cannons. It was done during the time that Serbia was being hit back during the whole Kosovo issue in 1999. So supersonic cruise missiles are a little bit harder to intercept. They can be, but they're very difficult. They're not hypersonic, but they're supersonic. Like, they break the sound barrier. The hypersonics are extremely fast and cannot be intercepted by conventional air defense artillery. That lie that was told about the Patriot intercepting a Kinzhal was laughable. It was laughable. How in the hell is a Mach 4 missile gonna lock on to something that's passing through their radar field so quick that by the time they finally get a signature and a lock and get to fire the missile, that thing's already out of the radar field and no longer able to be tracked, and it's going to hit its target. So regardless of even if they tracked it and got a missile out, you're firing a Mach 4 at a Mach 15 missile, or maybe a Mach 10 for the Kinzhal. Still, a Mach 10, the math doesn't work. The Kinzhal is Mach 10. Yeah, the math doesn't work. You're not going to hit the Kinzhal. Mach 4 would never catch up with that. It's just impossible for conventional air defenses to intercept those. So that was a total bullshit media narrative. It was a lie. Pardon my French, but I had to say that. Of course, you'd have Chi-Com supply bases everywhere on their CCP properties, like their farms. You see they're all set up. You got a supply truck. You got oil drums full of fuel. You got MREs and water, rocket tubes for the rocket artillery. With rockets in them, of course. You have ammo crates, and you got a tow motor here to move supplies. You got a barn full of supplies and spare parts for vehicles and extra fuel and munitions, artillery shells. You got more out here in the connexes. You got machine gunners watching the entrance and exits. You got the farmhouse way out there where the command is. I can't see it. There it is. That would be where the command is. You got the little commander's vehicle out there who's command over the supply forces here. You would have all of this stuff happening, a hammer and anvil movements in a city, where you have all these troops behind their armor personnel carriers or infantry fighting vehicles clearing neighborhoods block by block, just like this, where they'd have other forces here in a blocking position as they go through, and the troops on this side move in the buildings, this side they go in these buildings, and then they get out. When they're done, follow it up, go through, follow it up. They're all doing the same thing. And by the time they get here, you got these civilians in here. I have the yellow so you can see inside. You got civilians in there, whether they're armed or not, they're going to get, caught up, or if they try to fight back, these vehicles with heavy weapons are going to annihilate them, or the troops too. So basically, you're gonna have a lot of shit going on. Here's the tanks rolling up on the airport. This is a new concept art that I just made for this specific battle here, where they after they roll up here, they take the airport and then they set up a line here and are fighting mixed military and civilians in this brigade engineering battalion that rushed up here to try to stop them from going further. You see, in this kind of a conflict in fourth generation warfare, there are no front lines. There's only battle lines where units happen to run into each other, because if you have enemies inside your country and you have enemies coming from outside into it, there are no front lines. It's like a mix between asymmetrical and conventional style warfare. Only where you encounter the enemy is there battle lines where you clash, and then, retreats or movements, tactical movements. And of course, you have all the air support here supporting the ground units moving in. You've got artillery support. You would have drone support, armed drones. And China is not only has the most advanced drones in the world, but they're the biggest producer of drones. Iran also is a fairly big producer. Even though Russia is self-sufficient in creating drones, they didn't make kamikaze drones like Iran did. They only were making reconnaissance drones mostly. So that's why they bought the Iranian drones, because they proved to be effective in the fight in in the proxy war in Eastern Europe. So, yeah, even if they didn't get drones from Iran, they could have just bought some from China if they were just trying to fill their drone inventory, because Russia was largely, heavy on regular types of warfare, like with they're very artillery heavy, tank heavy, armored fighting vehicle heavy, MRAP heavy, or everything. So they had a lot of attack helicopters. I'm talking about Russia, and China also in all those areas, but more too. Like China is very drone heavy as well, and unlike Russia has drones, but they're nowhere like China or even Iran. So, they started buying Iranian drones, but if they needed other ones, they could have always bought them from China. Here's concept art of some of the fighting. You have a Chi-Com ground attack aircraft swooping down here like a Q-5 or the this one was a Q-5 swooping down, dropping payloads, and you would have all kinds of disasters going on. This was in the Fort Hood battle. You got Chinese and Russians put together in this battle because elements of the 2nd Combined Arms Army of Russia came in when they were invading Fort Hood, and Fort Hood was unprepared because most of the soldiers are not armed. They don't walk around these installations armed. They keep their weapons in the arms room, and it takes a long time to sign out weapons, and they were caught unawares. So the only ones that started resisting at first were like MPs, because those are the only ones that typically walk around armed, or anybody that was out training with live ammo. And there were some that could get to their rifles, but not very many. Fort Hood was taken quick. You got them tactically, grappling up into the window. You got Russian tanks clearing this street here. You got shells hitting and fires blazing. Here's People's Armed Police troops, paramilitary troops, and a stack team clearing out a house. The point man moved over just a little bit to toss a grenade in there where there's a guy hiding. Chi-Com Z-20 helicopters flying over the wreckage of the city. It's a city getting carpet munitioned by strategic aircraft, It would be a disaster. Crumbling buildings in the street and rubble flying every which way and gutted buildings that were on the fringes of a blast. This one probably was across the street from this one, but about to probably get hit. Highway outside of Fort Hood, it was I-35, where a couple American tanks were trying to get away, and they got knocked out by the column of PLA tanks rolling up the highway. In a city-urban fighting between infantry fighting vehicles and partisans who acquired some light anti-tank weapons like RPG-7s and light machine guns and such, and their regular arms. This is the type of stuff that would be going on. It would be a total disaster. You have to understand, the civil-military fusion policy is what granted China the ability to build up on our soil to begin with, and even in Canada. But they actually have like full-fledged military bases in Canada. If they got fighter jets flying up there, they've got military bases. Probably deep in the forests in Canada. They probably cleared out land and built their established bases up there, and any civilian properties are also their bases, but I'm sure they keep them like they do here. They keep them inconspicuous, like in more populated parts of Canada, because they don't want the Canadians to know too much. So, same in Mexico. But Mexico, it would be easier for them because Mexico's in a lot of turmoil, so, it's easier for China to hide amid all of that. Same with their allies like Russia and Pakistan and Iran, because, yes, Iran will be a part of the coalition that invades us. All the BRICS plus countries are basically aligned against us. Most of them will probably play a role in the invasion. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. But I put the most prominent ones, China being the most prominent, because they have the most forces under arms of any nation on earth. Because, a lot of sources don't like to count the fact that they have this enormous paramilitary, as well as like huge pools of reserves of people that completed their army contracts, that go into these reserve group armies, ready reserve. I've read the Chinese documents translated to English. I do a lot of searches on Baidu and Yandex mix because I use Eastern search engines as much as I do the Western ones because, you know, like I said, when I do my research, what I do is I scour for all kinds of sources, you know, articles, production numbers, everything you can imagine. And as I scour, you know, I basically, you know, look at everything I can, all the production numbers I can when it comes to vehicles, so I can get a baseline. And basically what I do from there on out is I basically get the baseline, and that's from adding up all the production numbers, running them through the matrix I have, which is, you know, how many were kept, how many were sold, how many were retired, if that's applicable, how many were destroyed, if applicable, if like in a battle, how many were repaired and put back into service, you know, all these different things that you would do to, you know, get the proper numbers, how many came off the production line, if applicable, you know, you would add up all those numbers to get your real numbers after you got a baseline. So you want the most correct information you can get because there's a lot of sources that give drastically incorrect information. And, you know, I would say that some of them by name would be, you know, when it comes to like anything relating to Eastern nations, you know, there's a bias on Western sources like Wikipedia and others. They like to, you know, pretend and take away numbers and act like, you know, China and Russia don't have what they really actually have and all that type of stuff. That's just an example, you know, and because, you know, people can go in and edit that too, you know, you have to be really careful. And it's just best to actually look at numerous sources to get your information and make sure you get the right baseline, and then you run everything through your matrix and make sure you get the correct numbers. That's why they hate my channel, because I'm thorough and I get everything right. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be heavily stagnated, shadow banned. I would be like everybody else. I'd just be mushrooming and growing. They don't want people to see this channel because I'm trying to help get people ready for what's coming. And what's coming is going to be extremely ugly. You know, we haven't seen anything yet. People talking about World War III this, World War III that, you know, a mouse farted, oh, it's World War III. I mean, every little thing, you know. No, these people have no idea what's coming. Like, what's coming here is going to smash this place into the dust. I mean, literally, like, we're going to be pounded hard into the dust. I mean, you know, by every type of conventional munition you can imagine, even newer weapons that haven't either been seen or haven't been used en masse in war yet. I mean, it is going to be brutally ugly, you know. And even as like a appetizer to the real World War III, we have these regional wars, which are a lot smaller in scale compared to what a real World War III would be. You know, in a real World War III, you're going to have an enormous invasion of Babylon by Chinese predominantly, but also Russians. They would be the next biggest contributor. And then you'd have like other fairly large nations like Belarus and Pakistan and Iran contributing pretty big contingents. I mean, and then you'd have other smaller nations like Cuba and, you know, and all that. You know, of course, North Korea would contribute, and they're a little, they're fairly big. I mean, they're not real big, but they're pretty big. They could contribute a fairly sizable expeditionary force to the invasion. I mean, you'd have all these BRICS plus nations sending something. Most of them, I should say, not all, but most, if they were able to. So you would have this enormous multinational force predominantly led by China and also Russia, and they would be basically coming in here the way I shown, and they would be smashing everything after they knocked out satellites, did their cyber attack, basically shut off the grid, the telecom, the internet, you know, satellite phones, satellite GPS, you know, all of that, satellite data transfers, military networks, all of that stuff would be knocked out. And don't forget the Chinese hacked solar winds, and even the military admitted that our nuke arsenal is compromised. So, of course, if that's the case, you know, China passed on information to their allies about our arsenal too. You know, there's Chinese electronic warfare assets in our country, Russian ones as well. We know that. I mean, I've gone over all this before. I've shown it on the battle maps and the hypotheticals. I mean, I played everything out exactly as it would happen, you know, with real units, real equipment, real everything, within the real guise of fourth generation warfare doctrines. That's what it's all about, showing people what fourth generation warfare looks like with real units, real weapons, real equipment, real battles, real everything, you know, comparing, you know, forces and using real life life as far as, the situations and how they would develop because of certain factors, like people not being ready for such a thing. Americans don't just walk around armed or wearing like armor all day, every day. They don't do that everywhere they go. That's ridiculous. It's not like they're going to like run to, their gear if they're out and about or going to the store or like at a restaurant. It's not like Superman where they run into a telephone booth and change and all of a sudden they're in their armor and their weapons and everything. There are some people that, thankfully, thank God, walk around at least with like a pistol or something. But I'm saying most people are not in their battle rattle, their gear, their Molly gear, their armored vest or their plate carrier or whatever, they're not walking around in that. So you have a situation where we're caught unawares, and it would develop just like in my audiobook where, you would have people fleeing large numbers fairly to the woods and to try to get away, because the smart thing to do is to get out of the hot zone, get to somewhere safe like nature, the woods where you can hide. Remember the coniferous pines, they cover up your IR signature extremely well. That would protect you from airstrikes and things like that, like from being spotted, because a lot of people are going to be reactionary idiots. I always put that into my work because you have to show that, because that's a real factor. You are going to have people that just run out of their house with their weapons and go looking for trouble, but trouble finds them first because they're spotted by an enemy recon drone and a mortar team drops a mortar on them before they even knew it hit them, and they don't even get to pull the trigger. You're going to have situations like that, or they get hit by a missile or rocket artillery, like a cluster of people gets annihilated by rocket artillery, or you have a howitzer drop a large 155 or 152 round on them, or God forbid even a 203 millimeter round, which is even larger. The Russians and Chinese have some very heavy howitzers like that, bigger than the 155 that we use, and they also use the Chinese use the 155 and 152, and the Russians use the 152 and everything. So yeah, we would be in trouble. That's an understatement. But these regional wars, you're going to have all these different proxy groups, like the Houthis that I've talked about before in a lot of my lives, and the Iraqi Shia militias, the Lebanese forces, including Hezbollah, and of course, the Syrians, you have Bashar al-Assad, and I'm sure he's pretty livid after, a civil war occurred and the West, tried to arm different sides of it that they favored. Russia, China, Iran, and proxies like Hezbollah gained a lot of combat experience in that endeavor, and they kept Assad in power. They saved Assad. He almost lost his civil war. The regime faction, which was Bashar al-Assad's regime, his faction in the multi-faction civil war was on the ropes. He was about done. They almost had his ass. He was about out of there. But you know what? Russia, Iran, Hezbollah came to his rescue and propped up his failing military, and he was finally able to replenish his military somewhat, while this was going on, while they stabilized the situation enough for him to be able to, regrow units, because you have to remember the Free Syrian Army broke off the regular Syrian Army, so they took all their stuff with them. It left Assad a little bit, depleted in some areas, and he had to rebuild his military, and so he grew new paramilitary forces and military forces to fight in his civil war alongside of his allies who came and saved him, basically. So the regime took back most of their territory, and basically the civil war has been won by Assad, even though there's like small-scale fighting around Idlib and out in the east. But it's really like basically he won, and the Russians saved him. So and the Chinese and the Iranians and their proxies, So basically, when this issue occurs in the Mid-East, if Israel goes into Gaza, they're going to be fighting 50,000 armed combatants down in there. And like I said, it's going to be like a Vietnam type of situation. They have all these underground tunnel networks where they can come up and into the rubbled streets, or even streets with remaining buildings, and they can ambush these armored vehicles and convoys and columns and troops, patrolling the streets. It's going to be a very tough, very hard fight. And if Hezbollah gets involved, they have more rocket artillery than all of Western European NATO allies combined. They have that much. They have just over 150,000 rocket artillery pieces. So you have that situation where all these proxy groups, including the Houthis and the Iraqi Shias and the Hezbollah and all of them, and even maybe the state of Syria, along with Iran itself getting involved in some kind of way, like sending volunteers, as a sneaky way to be involved in it, that could pull us in. But here's the thing. Once we get pulled in, there's the potential for us to be sanctioned, kind of like how we sanctioned Russia, but it backfired. If they sanction us, it won't backfire. And I mean sanctions as in an oil sanction, or they would call it an embargo here because they don't want to call it sanctions because nobody can sanction us, But it would be a sanction. It would be a form of sanctions. And also, closing the Straits of Hormuz. And Iran absolutely can do that. They absolutely have the capability. 1 second, hold on. So, anyways, you have Iran with very capable air defense systems, like I mentioned in my recent live stream, the Bavar 373, which fires the Syed 4 missiles, which have a range of about 187 miles. That's a pretty good air defense system. If they have them along their coast to protect their anti-ship missile batteries on their coast, that would provide good air defense. And, you would have, of course, a lot of Iranian troops, already, because, they have a sizable active duty army of 350,000 and they have an additional 350,000 reserves. So with their active army and reserves, their regular army would be a 700,000 man army. And of course, 37,000 Air Force, 18,000 Navy, 15,000 Air Defense, 270,000 IRGC paramilitary forces, and 600,000 besieged militia forces that can be called up at a moment's notice. And of course, there's millions of other men signed up for it, but they're not on any kind of active readiness status to be, inducted into the besieged, the formal militias. But they could be called up, like if there was an invasion, sort of like in the Iran-Iraq War. They basically would have anti-ship batteries on their coasts, and they would have their naval vessels armed with these anti-ship missiles like the Abu Mahdi, which has an incredible range of 622 miles. They would have those on the coast. They would have those on their warships. They also have the Ra'ad anti-ship missile, which is pretty standard in their inventory of 218 miles, 1,212 pounds of HE as their warhead, and although the Abu Mahdi anti-ship missile has a little less, it has 900 pounds of HE. Those are still substantial and can definitely damage or sink large ships depending on where they hit. So these anti-ship missiles, and there's a lot of them, they're very dangerous. Iran has a total of about 10,000 missiles between cruise and ballistic missiles. And no doubt that already, Iran played us as the fool, and they went ahead and built some nukes, even though we were trying to bribe them not to. We sent them all that money. No doubt they have nukes by now. You're not close to having a nuke, over 10 years ago, and you still haven't had one, 10 years later, when they kept saying, oh, Iran is extremely close to having a nuke, and they're still saying it. It's like, use some common sense. Iran played the West as a fool. They went ahead and built their nukes. They have them. That would be another consideration. I doubt they would use one, because they have their conventional forces pretty well stocked. Nobody wants a nuclear conflict. Nobody really wants that. People saber rattle and threaten it, but nobody really wants that. Do I think there will be some used? Well, yeah, absolutely. Like when Babylon's invaded, so I do believe certain spots will be earmarked for that, especially like maybe a counter force strike where they actually hit our silos and, known, depots where we have nuclear weapons stored and things like that. I do believe those will be hit and nuked. And I do believe very, very specific cities will be, because I've had horrible dreams about it, but not everything got blanketed by them. There's not going to be a full-scale nuclear war. That's insane. That is not going to happen. It's not even biblical. Babylon is invaded on all sides, not from the north, not from just the south, all sides, it says, inside and out, all the way around the outside. So it means there's beachlanders, there's forces coming down from Canada, from Mexico, there's Trojans inside already doing heavy lifting, all sides, That's what the word says. That's what Jeremiah says. 50 and 51 especially, that has all the heavy hitting stuff about the future. It's like a roadmap of the future of the nation of Babylon. We're invaded on all sides by enormous conventional armies after we've had a multi-faction civil conflict, which comes after the famine part and the collapse, the grand collapse, which, again, if we attempt to get into a new regional war directly with Iran, that will definitely cause collapse. If they do sanctions on us with oil, or what they call an embargo here, as a euphemism, if they do that, or if Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz to Western oil shipping, the West is done. It's over. The West is over. And because Egypt is being drawn into BRICS, plus they have the Suez Canal, and that means they would have control of the Suez Canal, and they could deny passage of certain ships as well. So this whole situation geopolitically is really screwed up for us. Now, Brazil being part of BRICS, Brazil actually has a formidable military for a Western Hemisphere nation. After us, Brazil has the next best military in the entire Western Hemisphere. It's not Canada, it's Brazil. Brazil has over 300,000 men on active duty and over 1 million men in reserves. I don't have my paper for them. I wrote things down. But they have a fairly large military when you count their reserves and everything, and they do have a pretty decent navy and fairly decent air force. I mean, it's kind of small, but it's good enough for air defense needs, because they don't have very well developed air defense artillery, meaning they don't really have very long range types of air defense. They only have very close in air defense, like air defense artillery cannons and like short range air defense, like man-portable air defense missiles, like Stingers on their Gepards, and they have the Igla missiles for their troops, and a few others I can't remember, but yeah, they're still a formidable military force. Now, I don't know if they're gonna jump in on the invasion of us or allow foreign troops to use their land, to get to us, but that was just something that crossed my mind. Brazil, I'm like wondering what would they do, because they are part of BRICS, but then they do have extremely good relations with Russia, and they're pretty close to China as well now. So, and South Africa, they're going through a lot of turmoil, but it seems that they're starting to, stabilize just a little bit. So, I just look at all these BRICS countries and all the power they have as a bloc compared to the West, who's failing, and their militaries are failing, and because they're giving away all their weapons and stocks that Russia's annihilating. I heard about Odeevka, the battle there, and apparently the Ukrainians are giving the Russians a little bit of a problem, but that'll pass. That's something that has been going on for the past almost 2 years. You hear about the Ukrainians doing well for like a day, and then Russia pounds the hell out of them with artillery and missiles and annihilates them and rolls them back. They create these cauldrons along the front where they allow Ukrainians to continuously reinforce them as they keep losing men into artillery fire and vehicles, to anti-tank missiles and everything. I mean, it's insane. I mean, truly insane. Ukraine is demographically ruined as a nation. All the millions of people that left said they'll never return. The people that are there are suffering severely. The only thing holding their economy up is all this money we keep sending to pay the Ukrainian troops their salaries and, the emergency services and the regime. We are literally propping that country up. The moment we withdraw our financial support, their economy will absolutely 100% collapse. So all of this going on, dividing our attention to the Midi and to Europe, and I'm sure another regional war will pop up somewhere that that these imbeciles will get us involved in, and continue to even divide us up even more, like as far as our forces abroad, and get them into very dangerous predicaments where they can be isolated and crushed by the local enemies they're supposed to be fighting, because they're not anywhere in any big numbers. Sure, we have this air mobility command that can deploy people all around around the world, but we send people to the most idiotic places where they don't need to be. They're not strategically important, and we send all these people all around the world, and, if something goes wrong, they're stranded there. They are stranded there. Like, there's a fuel crisis and we can't come back and pick them up and bring them home. This is stuff people don't understand or think about. Resource-wise, half of our fuel consumption is from foreign nations. We shut down and basically neglected that much of our oil production capacity. I mean, sure, we can produce enough to meet our needs, but because they went on this imbecilic green campaign and they shut off all these pipelines and oil rigs and derricks and everything, made it very difficult for us to supply ourselves. The moment foreign consumption is cut off or even just, severely cut back, we're going to feel it, and it's really going to disrupt things here extremely bad. I'm a very conservative-minded, thorough person, so I'm not like one of those people that's like, oh my God, nuclear war, be scared, or all this ridiculous narrative is going around. I tell it like it is, and that's why I'm hated, because I'm very conservative, with my estimations of how things will be, when they occur, and also I'm very, very thorough when it comes to my numbers, of course, and my information and my data. I make sure I give people the best information they can possibly have, because there's a lot of people that put out bunk information or just continually push media narratives, that aren't even accurate, because they're produced by spin doctors to begin with from the mainstream media. So it's like people that read MSM articles, they're not helping anybody. I'm here to try to help people to navigate what's coming, whether that's the collapse, the civil conflict right after that, which will be multi-way, which I have a great documentary on, the Syrian-style civil conflict docu-series in my playlist. Also the audiobook, which shows what it's like on the ground during the foreign invasion. All these things are here to help people. And I have a community tab story review even, where I go over the typed out stories I made in my community tab, which are a ways back. They're able to be read, but it's best to do it with a laptop or PC so that you don't have to continually, with a phone, go down and scroll all the way back down to read the next part, because they're separated by posts. Like, each post is a part, and they're a ways back in my community tab. But anyways, basically, I just want to help people. I want to help people, tear the narratives apart and see the truth. I want to help people to be able to get better prepared, because if they know what's coming, instead of thinking and planning off of distortions, like real distortions, inaccurate information, hype, and misconceptions, instead of making emergency planning based off of the wrong assumptions and all of those things I just mentioned, you can make emergency planning off of better, more accurate information, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do for people. I don't get a red cent from YouTube. You can look me up on that, whatever that is that shows you what people earn. You see a big fat zero for me. I'm just a retired soldier that got injured in a conflict, and I just really wanted to help people. That's why I do this. I care about people in general. There's a lot of good people, and I don't want to see people needlessly suffer or be caught unawares and not have a plan, that they didn't map out how they would get away from where they're at if their area got struck or invaded. I want people to see what the stuff looks like through the guise of hypotheticals, which are all based off of the most accurate information there is that I found through my many years worth of research at this point. And updating people and everything else. I just want to show people how things would play out so that they can make their plans according to reality instead of misconception, distortions, bad information, hype, and all this other stuff. I don't want people to be afraid. I want people to be empowered, even in my community tab story review, it starts out very simple, but it works its way up like building blocks. I start off with the very most important thing, and I discuss organization, because everything, begins there. And then I work my way up like bit by bit, and as I go, video, I get a little more in-depth with the information being covered. And, by the time you get to the end, it's like taking a whole course on preparedness, talk about everything from organization and equipment and field sanitation and how important and crucial that is because it prevents disease. And you do not want to get sick in a situation like this. You will be basically sapped of all your energy and your ability to carry on, and you cannot afford to have that happen to you. You cannot afford to get typhus or dysentery or whatever else you could get from horrible sanitation, because that stuff will kill you. I mean, it can kill you. Most people die from it when it happens to them, unless you have the right type of medication to treat it. But you will absolutely die from typhus and dysentery if you're not prepared to treat things like that and you didn't do your sanitation properly. That's dire in this type of situation. So yeah, I go over all of that stuff and tactics, like small unit tactics. People should get out and practice. Learn the capabilities of like your true capabilities. Because you can only do so much with your small arms. You cannot overpower a tank. You can't, like, you're not going to use a rifle or anything to attack a tank. Sure, there's things like, Molotovs and basic stuff like that, but I'm saying, you have to get close in, like in the stories, to use things like that, and they're going to pepper you with, heavy MG fire and rifle fire and things like that, or they're going to blast you if they see you, if you're far enough away. I mean, it's very, this type of thing is very perilous. It's a very perilous endeavor, and, you have many, I learned this in Iraq too, you have many opportunities to perish. I'll just put it that way, and I have to use my words carefully because it's a YouTube video. You have many different ways you can perish. Like once this begins, you can be struck by a cruise missile, rocket artillery, a howitzer shell, a mortar, anti-tank missile, flamethrower roast you, or be peppered with MG fire and rifle fire. I mean, you have so many ways to be annihilated. You'd have a munition dropped on your head from either a drone or a fighter or a ground attack plane, or I mean, there's so many ways you can be slaughtered. So you have to learn how to be nomadic. You have to learn either that or semi-nomadism, where you rotate between different places, where you have pre-positioned supplies and supply caches. That's very important too. You must have supply caches to sustain you when you're forced out of your home, because where everybody started at is not where they will end at. Let me put it that way. Wherever you started at, you will be forced out of, whether that's your house, your apartment. You are going to be forced to become, a nomad, essentially. And if you don't know how to do it right and move from place to place, or have pre-positioned caches that you can live off of while you hunt and do other things to augment your food supplies, or raid, or end up as you get a stronger group and training under your belt, and and you raid like a supply convoy of the enemy because it's the most lightly guarded type of thing. I mean, if once you like in my work, just watch and read my work, just watch it or listen to the audiobook. I mean, it'll teach you so much. I mean, once your group gets strong enough and you get disciplined and organized and you get better training and everything, you can achieve a lot more, but you need supplies to start with. If you don't have supplies, you will fry. I'll just put it that way. I was going to say the other word, but you know what I'm saying. Like you're out of there. You don't have supplies, you're out of there. You need supply caches, an absolute must, and you need a plan. You need an evacuation plan, because you're not going to be a reactionary idiot and get too far. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to go very far like that. You're not going to last for long. You run out there looking for trouble, their ISR assets will find you, like a drone or satellite spy plane, whatever. It'll find you, and you will be annihilated before you even see the enemy, most likely. So you want to get out of there as quickly as you can. You don't want anything to see you. You don't want a ground attack plane to see you. You don't want a drone to see you. You don't want satellite images, picking you up, and all the other stuff, or millimeter wave radars on attack helicopters, whatever. You don't want any of that to see you. You want to get out of there as quick as you can. You want to be booking it. just like in my work, how I show how all that works. Mostly it was the veterans and combat vets, like some of the regular veterans that didn't have combat experience, but at least they had the training under their belt. And combat veterans are mostly the people that organized the civies into coherent types of groups. It took them a minute to get them trained and organized and disciplined, but those are the people that lasted. Those are the people that lasted. The people that didn't have training, the people that were sloppy or just regular old civvies that are fat, dumb, and happy, they never lasted. They either became slaves in the Lao guys or Russian gulags and Chinese Lao guys, or they, were butchered, or genocided essentially for their organ harvested in the Chinese Lao guy system, or they were just butchered on the field of battle, like they were gone inside their home. They were watching TV, all of a sudden the lights go out, TV goes out, there's no telecom, no nothing. They're looking stupid, like, hey, what's going on? And then, artillery shells start flying in and blow their neighborhood to smithereens, or because they just sit there and then just don't know what's going on or what's coming. That's going to be a phenomena that happens to very many people. Or you get carpet munition by a heavy strategic aircraft, or you ground attacked by a squadron of ground attack planes. There's an unlimited way for bad stuff to happen to you. I'll just put it that way. People that don't get on it and get out of the way, those people, they don't have a good future ahead of them. I tried to show these things and so many angles of these things. I even showed what inside life in the Lao guy was like in my audiobook, because one of my characters, the Robinson family got split up, and Jacob Robinson was kind of passive. He had a job as a hardware store manager, and June Robinson, she was just a typical housewife. She was fairly, learned in some things, but she's just a typical housewife. But she was caught because her and her husband tried to go to a ad hoc, quickly established type of refugee center set up by the local National Guard forces, which were confused and split up and unorganized because they lost their military networks and communications due to the invaders, jamming all that stuff. And, they were scattered, and, they didn't have a lot of good organization at that point, but they did try to set up, places like tent cities, small tent cities for, refugees, and they ended up having to move them, and then they got ambushed and captured and some killed. And June was among the captured because she didn't make it with her husband, who booked it and ran over a type of like a berm in the woods, like a bit of land that jutted up like a berm almost, and he rolled over the other side of it in the woods. And somebody that was fleeing from another area that was getting basically cleared, surrounded and then cleared, they escaped an area on ATVs, because ATVs are small and they're reliable, and it's a good mode of transportation if you're, on the run from enemy military forces. Dirt bikes and ATVs are small, they're easy to conceal. You can move fairly quick with them instead of on your feet, but if you have something too big like a vehicle, then that becomes an easier target. But, something small like ATVs were the most efficient way to move. And they picked up, Jacob, and then they trained him, and he started going out with them and learning the ropes, and he survived a few encounters, and, he wanted revenge because his wife and family were gone. He went from a passive man, he had a transformation from a passive man to a warrior that wanted revenge. He turned into a warrior. But if you listen to the story, you'll hear what happens to his wife. She ends up being interrogated by an MSS officer of the Chinese intelligence, the Ministry of State Security, and he was interrogating her for information on the rat lines, basically. The rat lines, how Americans were escaping from Ann Arbor and getting out into the woods, these refugee areas, or to, groups that were going to, band together and try and resist or hide out. He was trying to gain intelligence, and she didn't even know what was going on. She just thought he was being nice because of how he was treating her and, giving her concessions, because when she got there, she was in a bare cell. She was treated horribly when she was processed in there, and she was in a bare cell, just in her in her scrubs, her jail scrubs, and, it was a concrete, put together real quick, like modular concrete prison, like portable prison cells and everything put together to make this camp. And then they had fold up wooden huts, like chicken coop huts that could fit fit 90 people in each one, and they were surrounded by barbed wire. That was like the outside, like general population area, like a concentration camp. That was a Lao guy. It was a transit camp, like to sort people and collect them and designate where they would go. And they had a brothel there too, where they put the other types of slaves, the women, some of the women. But June had a horrible experience in the Lao guy after she thought, he was just being friendly. The MSS officer showed her a torture cell and said it was good you cooperated because this could have been you. And he showed her the pea gravel torture that some of the inmates were suffering. So yeah, in that story, she gets transferred to the general pop and she gets to see some of the typical brutality of the People's Armed Police who were guards at that facility. But anyways, the audiobook showed so many angles of so many things that went on during the invasion. I mean, it was a very good, well put together story. I mean, I have a brain injury, so reading and, concentrating is difficult, and holding the phone and trying to record everything. I mean, that was difficult for me, but I think I did a decent job, all things considered. There was only one part where the volume went out, because something happened with the phone, but it was an important part because one of the main characters was killed in a battle, and, it was a shame that happened, but, other than that, it was a pretty well put together audiobook from beginning to end. It was very long, but all the stuff on this channel is 100% free. I don't hide any of this behind a paywall. I do this for free. I want to help people. I'm not going to give you bullshit propaganda or any of that stuff. I'm here to show real information, and I do that exceedingly well. And I mean that. And I'm saying that because it's literally true. So if you want good information, this channel's full of it. I mean, I have a whole library of materials that people can learn from. The hypotheticals and plus the actual facts and figures, capabilities, stats, national assets, all the stuff I go over, data points, everything like that is in my miscellaneous and Friday show playlists because they have their own playlist. But the hypotheticals all have their own documentary series because they are documentaries. So they are there to convey what the facts and figures show when it all comes together into a hypothetical scenario and how it plays out. And that is the most realistic rendition of the future when it comes to Mystery Babylon, and it's all completely biblically compliant too. That's the best part of it. It shows the future through hypotheticals because it goes along with everything it says happens to Babylon in the Word in Jeremiah. So I made it to basically match that, and also it shows the reality because the reality is matching what it says in the Word, as it goes by. So I'm just a researcher. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a watchman. I'm none of that. I'm a researcher, and I do very in-depth research. And I do it to help people, genuinely. I genuinely want to help people. I was a combat soldier. I've been in combat. I fired my weapon. I was injured. I've been in a few explosions in a vehicle, brain damage from it, and back and neck injury and all that. I mean, war. I've dodged an EFP before too. And, an EFP is a shape charge type weapon, and it was aimed, toward the road so it would hit a vehicle. It was timed to hit the vehicle as it went by, and I dodged an EFP by my convoy simply leaving an hour late over a negotiation to build a schoolhouse because since I was a combat soldier, I was a guard for the civil affairs team. They picked me out of my fob to be a security escort for the civil affairs guys. So we did, and, we went to Fob Warhorse, which is outside of Bakuba, and they were having negotiations to build a schoolhouse with the locals, the civil affairs team. So we got to kind of hang out and just chill and do our thing, have fun there. They even had a mini golf course on that forward operating base. So if you want to blow off steam, go play some mini golf. I love mini golf. So, we just had a cool weekend, and then we had to go back to work, doing our regular stuff at the FOB, getting ready for missions and, all sorts of stuff, raids, missions, and then doing our artillery stuff here and there. And this was before a really big operation where we went out and cleared a gigantic area of farmland to return it to regime control, to give it back to the puppet regime. And I've talked about all that before, but I'm just getting to the point that, I've been in war. I've been in all kinds of operations. I'm just a regular soldier. I ain't no SF. I ain't none of that shit. I'm just a regular soldier. And I experienced, plenty of combat and I've dodged a lot of things that could have killed me. Let me just put it that way. It was a hell of a tour, and I was just a regular soldier, and I made it home by the grace of God, like, seriously. Now, after that, I had no doubt God was real, because I could have been killed, because if my convoy left and went down Route Green first that day, it would have been me, because my vehicle was the second vehicle in our convoy. And my friend, I'm not going to say his name for privacy of his family and everything, my friend had his head taken clean off. I'll just put it that way. And by that EFP. And, you know, that could have been me. And it just bothers me to this day. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways, you know. One of our combat outposts when we were doing our big operation got mortared by small 40 millimeter mortars. I mean, there's so many things that happened over there that I've dodged and made it home. It's just, it's stunning. I'll just put it that way. It's stunning. It really makes me think sometimes. But this is why I want to help people, because I know what's coming here is going to be infinitely worse than even Iraq was. It'll make Iraq look like nothing. It'll make it look like nothing. So that's why I look at all this stuff that's going on right now, and it's bad. It's pretty damn bad, but it's not even as bad as real World War III, where we get a mud hole stomped in us by the Chinese and Russians. They're going to come, full force in here with everything they have, all their air power, missiles, naval power, their enormous land power. I mean, they're going to come in here and squash everything, and it ain't going to be. Most Americans who've lived like really coddled lives, really soft, simple lives that really like don't have any kind of hardship in their life and never really had any like real hardship, like been in war or been in a third world nation and lived there in those conditions. Those types of people, like your everyday people, your ordinary people, they're going to have no idea. Like when this comes, it is going to shock them. They will be standing there slack-jawed as this stuff is happening. And a lot of them are going to get annihilated like right off the bat, right off the muscle. A lot. So as bad as Ukraine is, as many Ukrainians have been slaughtered, don't get me wrong, a fair amount of Russians died, we're talking like roughly 20,000 Russian dead between the LPR, DPR, and actual Russian military, because they only sent in 70 combat battalions. I mean, that's 63 to 65,000 troops, along with their LPR and DPR militias, which is another 30,000, roughly 15,000 each of those. So what I'm saying is that, all these exaggerated figures that Western media gives are straight from the Ukrainians. They over-exaggerate Russian casualty estimations, and that's all it is estimations. It's not the real numbers. And they under-report their own numbers, but the mass graves don't lie. They're exhuming bodies in graveyards so they can turn it into a mass grave for all the new dead. There are so many graveyards in Ukraine. It's a shame. I mean, it's a damn shame. And most of the old original ones are all full. So, almost a whole generation of men have been slaughtered there. And even as bad as that is, that ain't going to be nothing compared to what comes to Babylon. Nothing. So heed my words. Heed my words. I'm not joking. Heed my words. Even as bad as what could happen in the Mid-E with Iran, that'll be pretty bad. We'll get a bloody nose from that. We will have lost ships, lots of lost aircraft that try and stray within their airspace, because we will lose pilots. It'll be like Vietnam, where we had thousands of aircraft shot down. I'm talking about fixed-winged aircraft, like fighters, ground attack aircraft, heavy strategic bombers. We lost over 3,000 of those, and plus we lost thousands of helicopters. So the full thing is about 10,000 when you include fixed wing and rotary aircraft and primitive UAVs we had at the time. When you include all of that together, that's about 10,000 aircraft we lost. But we lost, several thousand, over several thousand fixed wing planes to North Vietnamese air defense. And this was back when air defense was primitive, but we still operate some of the same aircraft today. So what I'm saying is air defense has gotten better, and as we've upgraded some of these aircraft, like the B-52, and there's some others that are still in service. The F-4 Phantom lasted a while in our service, and so did the F-5, and we even had I believe the F-16 came out around that time, and the F-15 as well. Like it was around the time of the Vietnam War era, but we operate a lot of those same aircraft still today, and those primitive air defenses were shooting down Vietnam-era aircraft, and some of those Vietnam-era aircraft still fly today, and they've been upgraded, and that's a good thing. But what I'm saying is that as air defense is improved, radar's improved, we have the very real capacity to lose a lot of aircraft. And one thing I've noticed is that Israel they don't like to report their losses, and I have no doubt the Syrian air defenses have shot down their aircraft, and they probably keep it hush-hush, like they tried to do when they went into Lebanon and, basically, got a bloody nose from Hezbollah and had to withdraw back to Israel. The two Lebanese wars, they had to withdraw. They had too many guerrilla fighters fighting them, and that was back when Hezbollah was small, and now they grew to about 60,000, troops. They have their forces set up like an actual army. If you go and read about them, they even have their own special forces and everything. I mean, this is real, and they gained power because of the Syrian civil conflict and all that combat experience and all the weapons they've obtained. I mean, it's just it's a bad situation. It's a very bad situation there, and it could lead to the collapse and famine here at home, and then into the multi-way Syrian-style civil conflict that we'll have. I mean, it's prophetic. It's in Jeremiah, and that's before we're invaded and get smashed. So people better heed my words. So I just thought I'd make this video. I really, when I make this project, I'm going to do the best I can, because I wanted to be a professional documentary filmmaker. I would love to do that. If I had the right equipment and everything I needed for that, I would love to make professional documentaries. But the next best thing I can do with the primitive stuff I have, I can make very, very cheap, very primitive documentaries. But, I put a lot of work into it. I do all the concept art myself. I, do all the maps myself by hand. I do everything by hand, and I write the scenario scripts. I mean, I do all of this, with very primitive means and the phone. So I put a lot of effort into making that stuff. It's not easy. It's time consuming. It's very time consuming to do everything by hand, but I do it to help people. So when I do my maps here in a few weeks, I hope it'll help everybody. I really do. So I'll add that to my 96-hour invasion. Instead of making it its own playlist, I'll put it toward the end of that one. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this video. God bless all y'all, and thank you.